Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, and in this Ready Gaming Tech.com video, we're going to be discussing as well as analysing tech news which, as usual, has popped up the past 24 or so hours. Hopefully you're having an amazing day. We've got a lot of stuff, as usual, to get through in today's video. I'd like to start, though, with just a quickie for the RX 6800 XT, specifically a world record which has been achieved as the 6800 XT has been clocked to 2.65 gigahertz. And this has actually been achieved by a well-known overclocker by the name of Lucky_Noob. Now, these results are insane, not because necessarily of the fact that he's managed to achieve the world record or the 2.65 gigahertz, which, normally you would probably say, well, he's going to have a, massive pot of liquid nitrogen and have gone through 2 trillion samples to get that perfect GPU which achieves these clock frequencies. But no, the thing that's actually ridiculous about this is the fact that it's actually achieved on air. That is, in my opinion anyway, absolutely ridiculous. The result was achieved on a 5950X, although it was actually overclocked using LN2 to 5.42 GHz, and this is accompanied with MSI's MEG X570 godlike motherboards. As a slight aside, I have to say, I really wish vendors wouldn't use such ridiculous names like their Asus board that I've been using for my 10900K is the ROG Maximus 12 Extreme, and that's not including the Z490 and all of that in the name. I don't know, maybe it's just me. I just think it's a little bit ridiculous. Let me know in the comments if you think that I'm making too much of that. Anyhow, the GPU is running at 2.65 gigahertz, for the 6800 XT and scored 47,932 points. And this actually puts it above any other single GPU configuration in FireStrike, which again means it's defeated things such as heavily overclocked RTX 3090s. For point of comparison, a 3090 using LN2 hits 2.385 gigahertz. And we are looking at a rather impressive result. I mean, the 1390 is about 200 points behind the 6800 XT. So it's not a really big, margin, but again, it's air cooling versus LN2. So it's not like they start on the even playing field, really, is it? I think that the RDNA 2 architecture shows a lot of promise. And I do think it's quite early, to be honest, to really judge either card. I think it's going to be, 3-6 months as drivers mature and developers start to release updates for ray tracing. But with that said, I think AMD are definitely here for high-end competition, and that, in my opinion, is fantastic for everyone. I think ray tracing, if you prefer ray tracing, then Nvidia may be the way to go, but perhaps not, as there's a very interesting demo that's just emerged. It's called Hangar 21, and it's actually only a video, so it's not a demo that you can download, at least right now. It's a 3.5-ish minute video, and it's running at 1080p, which is a bit of a shame that, again, you cannot download this. I wonder if that's so that Nvidia can't play around with the demo. I don't know. That's just a guess on my part. Hopefully, it does get released to the general public soon, but it does focus primarily on ray tracing. So we've got things such as, soft shadows as well as reflection. But it also, of course, is accompanied with other things such as mesh shading and DirectX 12 Ultimate stuff in general. So yeah, I mean, the demo looks really cool, at least to my mind. I think it looks really pretty. Again, this is one of those things where game engines are only really starting to fully come to grips with what ray tracing can do. I mean, sure, the next-gen consoles do support this, but ultimately they've only just released, and developers have not had a huge amount of time with them in the grand scheme of things. Game engines beforehand, they were only really using Nvidia's technology, so there is an awful lot left to do, and I think that game engines will really quickly evolve over the next couple of years to fully take advantage of what ray tracing can actually bring to the table. AMD themselves have now released some information concerning the architecture of RDNA 2 anyway. Obviously, this did start to come up with the reviews yesterday, and it really just does highlight that a lot of the underlying technology is similar to that of the consoles. I will go into this more extensively soon-ish for the PS5 and Xbox Series X, but this slide in particular, number 21, you can see that there's 4 ray/box intersections processed per CU, and that's one ray/triangle intersection per process per CU clock. And again, onto the right there in the red, you can see the ray tracing accelerator. So AMD's RDNA 2 implements a high-performance ray tracing intersection acceleration architecture. The ray tracing accelerator handles intersections of rays with BVH bound in volume hierarchy, which, for those who don't know, it's basically like a sorting structure which allows you to accelerate the speed that a ray/triangle intersection is found, and it provides an order of magnitude increase in intersections compared to a software implementation, i.e. it runs much faster than if this code was just running on the CU themselves. And there's also some examples of what AMD have done here: dynamic global illumination, ray traced soft shadows from area lights. That's one of the things that seems to be really heavily shown off in the Hangar demo, hybrid reflections and screen space effects with full ray tracing. And again, this is, well, just smart usage of the GPU. Because at the end of the day, ray tracing is very heavy in just the cost of actually running it. So you don't just want to do like a whole bunch of it unnecessarily. It's imperative to kind of use things smartly. But anyway, the demo itself, the Hangar demo, is running on the 6900 XT, and it's also running on a 3900. So it's not even the 5900 they're doing this on. But to be honest, it's obviously very much more GPU intensive. I assume, I don't have the performance metrics, but I'm assuming it's a lot more GPU intensive than it is CPU intensive anyway. I also would like to just quickly touch on something regarding Apple, and it's the M1 chip. This is not really going to focus on the performance of the chips. Instead, I want to focus on the cost saving for Apple. M1 is a completely different direction. Obviously, they're literally changing the CPU, the brains of the system, for their own designs, and it's based upon ARM. I have to say that I personally have a soft spot in my heart for x86. And I know that logically x86 is not life. x86 is not the be-all and end-all. And there are usage scenarios where the x86 architecture definitely has disadvantages. But for me personally, I have rose-tinted glasses with the x86 architecture just because of my legacy with it for the PC. But it's very hard to disagree that this architecture has a lot of potential. And there's a very interesting analysis by IBM's AI strategy lead, Sumit Gupta. Hopefully pronounced that correctly. This is courtesy of WCCF Tech for the discovery of this article. I'll of course link both in the description. Anyway, according to this analysis, the chip itself is going to cost about 40 to 50 US dollars per unit, which doesn't sound bad, but compare this to 200 US dollars or to 250 US dollars that the chip would cost from Intel for either the MacBook Air or the 13-inch MacBook, either a dual or a quad core, respectively, then you can see just how much of a saving that is. I mean, if you're selling like millions of units, and obviously Apple are, the numbers here are 8.6 million units that you're looking at basically the grand totals are about 3.2 billion for the Intel solution, but it's going to cost you a shade under 700 million for the chips for the M1 solution. So you're saving over 2 billion US dollars, 2.5 billion US dollars, which is obviously a ridiculous amount of money. So it could well be that other vendors are just forced to make changes to the architectures, and it's going to be just really interesting to see how the market plays out for this, because it's not just, of course, the cost savings, but the fact that these architectures are so damn power efficient. And they also, from what I gather, I still have to do a lot more reading on M1, honestly, but from my early initial reading on the benchmarks and yeah, just the chips itself, they seem to also scale rather well. So it's not one of those things where, oh, you know what, they've got an inherent flaw, you add more cores or you crank the clock frequencies up, and the performance, you crank the clock frequency up 50% or increase the core count 50%, and performance only goes up, a marginal amount. No, it's not like that. They seem to scale really well. And yeah. Again, the market does tend to move in directions where there's an awful lot of performance. So I don't want to be doom and gloom. I'm not on the x86's dead train by any stretch of the imagination. But I have a sneaking suspicion that chips over the next couple of generations from Intel and AMD will need to change rather drastically and become a lot more efficient. Obviously, I discussed a patent yesterday for AMD, which is a change in the cache of, it looks like it's Zen 4, and it seems that it's compressing the data on the cache. And these are just one examples of many of changes that will need to be implemented in the microprocessor architecture to enable Apple to be, to enable these companies to be competitive with Apple. And the last thing I'd like to discuss actually concerns, well, actually, both the PlayStation 5 as well as the Xbox Series X. Specifically, the Dirt developers have actually provided more information onto the PS5 and Xbox Series X. He said that a lot of folks wanted to buy Dirt 5 on the PlayStation 5 because of the haptic feedback, and he said that they really like the haptic feedback of the PlayStation 5, but they are not happy with their implementation of it. So what they're going to do is they're going to redo it, change it, tweak it, and improve it. This, by the way, is thanks to a Game On Daily live stream. And this is from the technical director of the studio, David Springate. So I will, of course, link this in the video description. There's also a lot of discussions concerning the Xbox Series X and the performance. I'm going to read this verbatim. We look at all the things all of the time, and I can't promise which stuff is going to become in the future patches because we have to balance loads of different things, but it might. That's the best I can do. In terms of the fast storage of the Series X, I think the hardware is great. I worked on it, with Microsoft early on and provided some feedback to them. I looked at the speed that we're able to get from it, and you can get 10 gigabytes in 2 seconds in my personal early tests. And it may be able to do way better than that. And this is without compression in the hardware. This is just raw. Then Microsoft, of course, have actually advertised its 2.4 gigabytes per second for raw I/O. And David added, the way you get the most out of fast storage on all platforms is to make as many requests at once. You want to load 500 textures. Forget loading one texture, you want to load them all. That then gives you challenges on how to lay out your data. You need to know what it is you need before you ask for it. That's the challenge. It's not the hardware. It's not the API from Microsoft or Sony. It's the engineering challenge. We're very close and we've done a load of testing. And it's not something I'm going to come to say it'll come in a patch or something, but I'm very interested personally. Quote. Hey guys, it's Paul from the future, and I'm adding a bit of additional audio, so if you missed this the first time round, well, I'm adding some more stuff to it for further clarity, because there's a slide from the Hot Chips conference called SOC Multimedia I/O Storage and MISC, and you can read yourself under System Mass Storage each of the NVMe SS drives on the Xbox Series X, that is, assuming you do add an external one, has a ×2 PCIe Gen 4 link available to it, which means you've got 4 gigabytes per second for each drive, that is uncompressed maximum read speeds. And this is according, again, to the PCIe 4 spec itself, which is, of course, common and must be adhered to for obvious reasons. Now, you can also double check this yourself because the I/O hub under the socket block diagram has a ×8 link available to it, but that is for everything. That is for USB, that is for Ethernet, and so on and so on. So what basically happened is in my original upload, because I'm tired and I've been dealing with PS5 unboxing and issues with exports all day, so I apologize. No excuses, I screwed up. I basically got these two figures in my head, like just absolutely just joined them together, and I in my head for some reason I had the ×8 as the SSD total bandwidth, when of course it's actually the I/O hub. So no excuses, I screwed up there. So I'm adding this a bit of additional audio because it would mean that there's something weird here given what the developer has said. Now, I think that the developer most likely was either approximating, so for example, they could have meant that it was around 9.7 gigabytes per second and it was just over 2 seconds that it took for that, or it could mean that instead they were referring to GBps, or it could be a number of other things. Unfortunately, what we don't have, of course, is exact benchmarks of what was being transferred, what type of files, what the exact tests were, and all of the other, conditions which would have given us more insight into this. Either way, I'm still very impressed with the actual transfer speeds of the SSD. It is still much faster than what Microsoft have touted for the Xbox Series X, which is 2.4 gigabytes per second. So even if you say that, it's only 4 gigabytes per second, of course, this all does depend on overheads, and those overheads will change vastly depending on a number of criteria. But either way, it's still, at least in my opinion, very impressive. And yeah. Also, rather interestingly, I was told by one of my sources that the PlayStation 5 can be updated with improvements in compression algorithms, which seem to basically be on OS level. So, long story short, you can get better compression ratios of data, and I also believe that this is applicable to the Xbox Series X as well. So this means that you can get better compression ratios, which again means that you can fill the main system memory up faster. What I'm trying to say to you all is that people really have this thing of thinking that both systems are maxed out when they're really not. And I personally believe it's going to be a while before we really understand what these consoles are capable of. Personally, I think that the game changers, and I really hate that term, but it just seemed applicable, would be the new game engines that are being bought up now. And of course, game engines which already exist when they've been more heavily modified. A really good example of this would be Unreal Engine 5. Just that engine alone has been massively changed compared to UE4. Currently, UE5 is in beta, and of course, we've already seen the Lumen demo, but it certainly is not all that the engine is capable of, and Epic are obviously adding more features, and it is only in beta at the moment. UE4 has had numerous improvements and tweaks, including support, of course, for hardware-based ray tracing on all of the consoles and all of this other stuff. But at the end of the day, many of the fundamentals still exist. I think that these high performance figures are also going to really change how the PC is designed. We've seen on the PC, for example, SAM, Smart Access Memory from AMD and Nvidia, are also going to be supporting it. And obviously, this is incredibly important because low latency data access between the CPU and GPU is one of the strong points of consoles. but there is an awful lot of differences in the fundamental ways that buses work on a PC versus the consoles. So the velocity architecture and a lot of the changes that we're going to be seeing on the PC are also going to really benefit from this stuff. I think that it will mean that folks who do have like a SATA SSD are probably going to be left out into the cold. You can probably make up some of this by brute forcing it or using lower texture quality. So, for example, 16 gigabytes of memory at the moment on PC is very standard for gaming. It's not a high-end spec. And then obviously you've got your graphics card as well, which is generally 6 or 8 gigabytes. There are higher capacity cards available, like the 6800 series that has 16 gigabytes of VRAM. Nvidia's series has like 10 gigabytes or plus, depending. But I suspect in a couple of years' time, you're going to get much smarter usage of the memory that you've got in the system. But furthermore, of course, the capacity of DRAM is also going to go up. I suspect that 32 gigabytes on PC is going to be very standard in a couple of years' time. I think that 32 gigabytes plus like 16 for main system memory, which is obviously going to help a lot. As for the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, it's going to be really fascinating. I also have a lot of folks asking my opinions in terms of the performance, the early performance numbers of the Xbox and PlayStation 5. And I am working on that. I've actually just got my PS5 today. I've already got Xbox Series X. I've done a little bit of frame rate testing on that. I have my PS5. There's going to be an unboxing video today on the channel as well if you want to go ahead and check that out. It's really early. Basically just trying out the system, making sure that it all works, doing the initial setup, that type of thing. But so far, I'm really liking the PS5. I'm really liking the Xbox as well, to be fair. Both systems, at least in my very early testing for that PlayStation 5, it's whisper quiet. My Xbox is whisper quiet. So, we'll see as the generation continues. With all of that said, thank you very much for checking out the video. Normal stuff. If you have enjoyed it, like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you soon. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.